Welcome to the Virtual Excellence Show, where we speak to amazing people about how to be excellent in an increasingly virtual world. And our guest today is Stan Garfield, whose book has just come out, Handbook of Community Management. Known Stan for probably a couple of decades as a deep expert in knowledge management and in communities. And today you will learn all about how to manage communities well from the expert himself. So, welcome to the show, Stan. Fantastic to have you on.
Hi, Ross. Thanks for having me today.
So, tell me about communities. It's 2020. It's a different world than we had before, just a little bit. So, why are communities important?
Well, Ross, it's interesting that communities have actually been around for quite a long time, but in some cases, people are just recently discovering them. But I think back to when I joined the corporate world, which was back in 1983 with Digital Equipment Corporation. That's a long time ago. I think that's 37 years ago, if I'm correct. And they had communities at that time, communities of practice, which we called Vax Notes conferences. These were online virtual communities. They had them for all the major topics of importance to the company. And they also had communities for things that weren't business related. So they had things, for instance, like for the ski club. And they really had the idea that if we get everybody being active in an online community, including the ones that weren't business related, that this would then carry over into the one, and that worked well. And so it became the standard, the norm at the company, that if you had a question, if you were looking for a resource, or if you wanted to talk to someone about a particular topic, the accepted way to do that was to go and look in the associated Vax Notes conference. And if you searched in there first and didn't find anything, then you would post a question, and then the members would respond in a quick fashion with answers and support. So I think I got an early introduction to that, and I've seen that essentially carry on ever since then. What's different about it today is that there are more people online. There are more people used to using user interfaces that we describe as social media, such as Twitter and Facebook, LinkedIn. But the concepts remain pretty much the same. A group of people who share an interest or a passion or a topic or a concern or a set of problems come together to learn together from one another, to be able to help each other, to solve problems together, to innovate, to be able to advance the field. And to me, that's always been a powerful proposition. It's not a new one, but it's one that today we can really take advantage of, because now virtual online interaction is becoming more the norm, when at one time it wasn't. So if you look back in time, people would have said to some people, why are you wasting time, doing things online, get back to work. And now work consists of being online. So I think the times have aligned with the fact that being online and interacting virtually was always a powerful capability that allowed organizations to connect people across boundaries, across time, across space, and especially connect people who wouldn't otherwise know one another. They would know people that they work with, but they wouldn't necessarily know people working elsewhere. But communities cut across those boundaries and allow people to connect and learn together. So I think they've always been powerful, and they certainly are today.
So community management is, I suppose, this idea that actively being able to catalyze, bring together, create value from the community. So I always want to, like to come back to beliefs. You've lived and worked in this for decades. So, what do you think? Some of the precepts, some of the things which we need to, most understand when we come to this idea of communities and managing them to create as much value as possible.
Yeah, the role of the community manager is very important. Communities generally won't thrive without at least someone doing a good job as community manager. They don't necessarily have to spend a tremendous amount of time at it, but they've got to do it effectively. And what does that mean? It usually means that they are stewarding that community, helping people to find it and join it, helping people who are in need of help to ask their questions in the community, making sure they do that, other people respond, scheduling activities such as community calls or meetings, making sure that if there's content being generated, that it's being properly collated, collected, stored so that it can be found and retrieved. But at the core, I think the community manager, someone who plays the role of connector, someone who finds people who are otherwise disconnected and invites them into the community. So I'll give you an example of this that I encounter all the time. Because I'm somewhat well known in the field of knowledge management, I often get requests from people who want to talk to me or they want to ask me a question. And what I typically do with that is I encourage them to join a community that I lead, which is a knowledge management community called the SIKM Leaders Community. And I ask them if they'll join that and they'll post their question or request into the community's online discussion, that I will be glad to answer them there. But I say to them, they'll also get more answers than just mine. And then there'll be two major benefits to doing that. One will be that instead of just being a one-to-one conversation between that person and me, which only benefits that one person, it'll benefit potentially hundreds of people who are the other community members. And then the other benefit will be that other people will respond and you'll get more than just my answer, and that may be a lot better and more useful to you than just hearing from me. So I have a mixed result with that. Sometimes people take me up on that and join the community and ask the question, and then I'm pleased to see that they get good answers. Sometimes they don't. So that gets to one of the challenges of any community. It's getting people not only to join, which is the easy part, to actually overcome their reluctance to ask a question in the open. I think that's one of the big challenges we've faced in knowledge management since the beginning of it, is getting people to overcome that reluctance to expose the fact that they don't know the answer and to appear ignorant in front of a bunch of people, including strangers that they don't know and trust. And yet, benefit of that, if you can get them to do that, is they'll get what they're looking for. So I think that's the big challenge of the community manager, getting people to overcome that reluctance, getting people to pay attention to what's going on in the community. So if someone does ask for help, that someone else will see that and respond to it. So another role of the community manager is just to monitor all those threads, and they see a thread that's going well, you don't have to really do anything. That's good. But if you see one where someone asked for help and they didn't receive a response after a short time, then you usually step in and you try to get them an answer, either by answering it or by asking someone else to answer. And the tactic that I often use is just to go in and respond to that person and say, I noticed that Ross hasn't received an answer yet. I'm sure the members have some good advice. Would you please respond? And that usually does the trick. People will then take that prompt and they'll respond, and then things go really well.
So in the book, you mentioned the 99-1 rule. Can you tell us about that and what that means for the role of community manager?
Yes, the 99-1 rule refers to a law or a rule of thumb, if you will, about how participation works in any community, in any kind of social network. And I view it as sort of a law of nature. We can't necessarily explain why it is. We just know from monitoring it that it is. And that is that in any community, 90% of the people will benefit by reading and following and paying attention, but they may never post anything into the community. About 9% will post at least sometime, maybe just once, but they'll post something once. And then there's 1% that will post frequently. So the importance of understanding that is, first of all, that's a fact that you can't really do anything about. I think some of the people that have been in the field have said, that rule is obsolete, or it doesn't apply, or you can change it, or you can make the amount of participation greater. Based on my experience and research that I did, you can't overcome it. In fact, Jakob Nielsen, a leading expert in usability, had long ago written that, what can you do about this? You can't do anything about it. So what you do is you recognize it and you say, there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, if 90% of the people are paying attention and learning, that's good. And don't argue with that. And just as long as the other 10% are posting and responding and sharing, the community can function. So I say is, don't try to change the rule. You can't, but instead try to get more people to join. So if you go from a small community where the likelihood of that community being active is low to a large community where the odds increase, then 10% of a larger number is a larger absolute number of people. So I say, if you start with a community and there's only 10 people in it, chances are the community will fail because only 1%, meaning one person, will ever post, and that's not sustainable. But if you get up to 100, then 10 people will post, and that's better. If you get to 1,000, then 100 people will, and that's diversity then, so that's good. So try to keep growing your community, but understand that people are mostly going to be just watching and listening, and don't consider that bad. Don't try to call them names like lurkers, which may have a negative connotation. Instead, those are people who are learners, and they're learning and benefiting, and as long as they pay attention to the community, then that's fine. So that's what the 90% rule is about. Understand it, grow your community to be large enough, but don't try to overcome it.
So you're writing, of course, about the context of knowledge management. So how do we nurture, grow, apply knowledge? The word community also has very much a connotation, of course, people who are close, people who are connected, people who have emotional ties, be they through geographical proximity or values alignment or whatever. So can you say a little bit, about that role of the emotional, that human connection, as well as that role of the knowledge and sharing and learning?
Yes, that emotional aspect is so important. In fact, our next SICAM Leaders Community presentation is going to be by a fellow Australian, Matt Moore, who's going to talk about knowledge management and emotion. So it's a timely observation, Ross. But I would say that knowledge is only really effectively shared when trust can be established. So if you try to set up some sort of community where people don't actually get to know one another in some way, and it's viewed in a way that's threatening or scary, then you're going to have less actual knowledge exchange. And that's generally true if you think what Dave Snowden has said over time, which is that if you ask people to share their knowledge in advance of a need, they're reluctant to do that. But if you ask them in the context of a need, they'll always share it. Well, community to me is the ideal way for that to be taken advantage of. If you just have a repository of knowledge and you have a formal contribution process in a company, chances are you'll struggle to get useful content and you'll struggle to get people to reuse it. But if you have communities where people get to know each other, they can relate to each other. When they ask for help, the other person can empathize with them because they can say, well, yeah, I've been in that situation. I can recognize the need that you have, and I'm sympathetic, and I will give you some help. The two contrasted show that a community ultimately is probably a more effective means of knowledge flow than traditional document collection exercises. So that's why I say if someone asks me the question, if you could only do one thing to do knowledge management, what would it be? I say I would set up a communities of practice program, because I'm confident if you do that right, that it will actually allow knowledge sharing to occur effectively. And I'm not sure that anything else you set up will work quite as well. Now, what does an effective knowledge management communities program look like? Well, it has to have at least one community, and actually exactly one community for every important topic. You don't want multiple communities on the topic because that fragments the knowledge, but you want to have at least one, because then you'll have somewhere for people to go when they have a desire to learn about that topic. You want to have everyone who's an expert in that, or is interested in it, or has had some experience in it, or just has a mild interest. You want them all to join that community so they can all benefit. Then here's an important part. You want them to all pay attention to the community. And then pay no attention. Like if you don't subscribe to the online discussions so you get at least some kind of digest or alert, then you won't really be aware of what's going on. You won't be able to learn. You won't be able to respond to the questions that others pose. So if you have one community and exactly one for every important topic, everyone joins that community who has some relevant experience or background in it, and everyone pays attention, then you can make a powerful promise to the people in your organization by saying, if you join the community, and if you have any need or question or interest in sharing, if you do it there, that will be effective. So that would be why I would say it's powerful to use communities as sort of a core of a knowledge management effort, because of that emotional connection, people empathizing with each other, people getting to know each other. And if I don't know you, but we interact in community, eventually I will get to know you. I'll see your posts, I'll get to understand sort of your style and your interests, and then we'll get to know each other that way, which will increase our level of trust.
So, as you know, Stan, I'm very focused on external relationships and value and knowledge. And so, what's differences are there, if any, between the internal communities, between people who are the employees of an organization, and the external communities, who might be customers or suppliers or participants in a value network? How are these are they run the same, or do we need to consider them differently?
Well, there are differences between the internal and the external, but I think you run them the same, and they fundamentally are the same. The difference is the internal community, because it's inside a firewall, can discuss confidential topics and proprietary information that couldn't be shared outside. But it then has the limitations of not having all the people in the community who might be able to help or benefit. So you probably should think about communities carefully. If they do in fact need to be confidential and keep proprietary information within the firewall, then you make them internal. But if there's no such requirement, then you might be better off not having an internal community and just participate in an existing external community. So I'll give you an example of that. For knowledge management, which is the topic that I'm most passionate about, I've had both internal and external communities for that. So when I was at Hewlett Packard, we had an internal KM community. And I've also been the leader of the SIKM Leaders Community, which is an external community that cuts across boundaries of companies, for 15 years. So when would you go to one versus the other? Well, I would say if you're trying to ask a general question or learn in general about the topic of knowledge management, you're going to do better by going to the external community, because you're going to find nearly 900 members around the world there from every possible background, and you have a much greater chance of learning and getting your questions answered there. But if you're talking about the internal knowledge management program at HP, and maybe you have some concerns about it, then the internal community would be a better place for that discussion to take place. You wouldn't necessarily have that discussion outside the firewall. So I can see benefits of both, but I think the mistake, the narrower you make your community and the less that it crosses organizational boundaries and the more it's within just one organizational silo, the less valuable it is. And so one of the fundamental tenets of communities of practice is that they cut across organizational boundaries. So at least within a company, you should say, this is not just for engineering, this is for all of the company. And you'd find people resisting that. They'd say, I don't want to be any of those other people in it. It should be our community, and I don't want any of those salespeople in my engineering community. And I'd have to argue with them that, no, actually, there's a benefit to that. If you are the engineer working on this product, don't you want to hear from the salesperson who's in touch with the customer about how that product is working out? So you try to broaden the scope within a company, but then to take it to its largest extent, you go outside, and external communities ultimately have the greatest potential benefit because they cut across the most boundaries and they have the most diverse set of members in them. So I would argue, don't create an internal community at all if there's an external one available and you don't have any kind of proprietary concerns.
Right. So you write at length in the book around the role of community manager, and you've talked about that before around perhaps part of their responsibilities. So when is this a full-time role? When is this, I suppose, bundled into some other role? And how do you find the community managers? How do you train or develop them? And how important are they inside an organization?
They're extremely important. Very few communities will ever thrive without a good community manager. And the reason for that is, as I had mentioned before, about some of the roles that they play, which is scheduling activities and hosting events and answering questions and posting in the online discussions, and then expanding the community, helping it to grow. Those are all roles that community managers play. So it's hard for those things to happen without somebody explicitly doing them. It doesn't need to be a full-time job, but it needs to be something that's done by someone who is personally passionate about the topic. If you try to assign it to someone who doesn't really want to do it, it's unlikely that they'll do a good job of it. So you want to find the person who says, I love this topic and I want the community to thrive, and I'm going to put my personal energy into making that happen. And if they do, chances are the community can thrive. And then if the community is going well, if it's grown to a large size and it's been functioning well, the community manager role actually shrinks down in terms of the hours that they have to spend. So when I would help people get the community started at companies like HP and at Deloitte, I would tell them you have to expect to spend a fair amount of time when you're getting it started, because you have to get members to join and you've got to lead by example and you've got to prime the pump and do other startup activities. But if you get to a steady state where it's growing and thriving, your time commitment goes down, because then you're just mostly monitoring it. And if it's going well, and if a question gets asked and someone else answers it, you don't have to do anything. You just say, good to see that. And you might have some ongoing activities like scheduling the monthly calls or occasionally sharing things in the community, but the time commitment can be less. But what I do say is, if you don't have at least some of the time allocated to it, if it's a case where the person really has some other very demanding job and they're supposed to do community manager in addition to that, but they don't really have the time for it, that doesn't work. So whoever you choose, you have to have it so that they say, yes, I'm committed to this and I want the community to succeed. And I'm not just doing this because I've been told to, and I will dedicate whatever that time is, but that time could end up being 10% or 20%. It doesn't have to be a full-time job.
So we're seeing more and more. I mean, I regularly say that community is the future of business. And as we've seen that instead of hub and spoke, as you sell products and services to a bunch of people, you are actually catalyzing value between them. And at their best, some of the platform models that we're starting to see are, again, not just your hub and spoke, but actually encouraging engagement or sharing of value between members of the community. So in terms of building these platform, or I would argue community business models, is there anything to keep in mind to be able to get that broader engagement, to where people can see the value of contributing and participating, not just being a buyer or just in this part of a hub and spoke model?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting challenges in the current environment is the idea that I propose and put in the book, which is that communities should try to have some in-person activity, at least occasionally. Now that's a challenge today, but still that could translate into, let's devote some of your community activity to not just the routine of posting and replying and having a community call. Put some energy into fostering community relationships. So instead of it just being transactional, do something that allows people to get to know each other a little more, maybe have some social-like activity. So if you can't have an in-person meeting, then maybe you can have one of the community calls where it's more social and less technical, let's say. But in the case of the SICAM Leaders Community, let me just take that example. Community was formed at an event. It was formed at a KM conference back in 2005. So we met in person, and then the community became virtual. So its members are all over the world, and rarely would be the case where we could get together. But there's one time a year where we try to do that. At the annual KM World Conference held in November in DC, we invite everyone who's going to be there. It's obviously not everyone in the community, but everyone who's going to be there to come together for dinner on one night. And so that's been a tradition we've had in place now for a long time. And that symbolizes, I think, the power of getting people together to really get to see each other, to see each other across the table, to develop a personal relationship. And I think if you can't do that now because of the pandemic, then you should at least try to simulate that with something online. So as an example, locally, I have a knowledge management community here in Detroit that I'm involved in. And we used to get together in person once a month for lunch. And so we haven't been doing that, but we continue to meet through a Zoom call once a month, and we have a virtual lunch. So we see each other and we talk about things that aren't just knowledge management. And I think if that's responsive to your question, developing personal relationships where people feel like they know each other, they can trust each other, and that they will go out on a limb for each other, that makes a powerful community. Whereas if you have one where it's just online, and if the culture of the community tends to be a little testy, and if you say something and someone snaps at you, or then that's a negative thing. People will be discouraged from posting in that community. So I do believe, however you do it, whether it's strictly online or it's a combination of online and in person, if you can foster where a community feels like they're friends with each other more than that they're kind of foes or debate challengers, then I think that makes the community thrive more.
Fantastic. So thanks so much for sharing your insights on communities. It's such an important topic today. So how can people buy your book and find out more about your work?
Well, thanks for that, Ross. So the book's available on Amazon, and if you want to find out anything about me, if you just Google my name, Stan Garfield, you should come to my Google site. And on my Google site, you'll find all of the materials that I've published over the years that I've been in the field, coming up on 25 years now in knowledge management as of next year. And so all of my publications, including articles and presentations and blog posts and books, are all there. So you can either just Google Stan Garfield and go to the Google site, or you can connect with me in LinkedIn. There's another way, or just go to Amazon and search on my name, and I have an author page in Amazon, and you'll see that book and my previous books there. And any of those ways should work.
Fantastic. It's a great set of resources, and it's great you're sharing your knowledge and insights with the community.
Yes, I've tried to do that. And as we say, practice what you preach. So I've tried to do that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us, Stan. Have a great rest of your day.
You're welcome, Ross. It was a pleasure.
So, Stan Garfield, who tells us all about communities and how to be able to form those well in not just a virtual world, but also in a real world context. So please like the show if you've liked it, and subscribe if you'd like to hear more about insights into doing things well in a virtual world. Thanks so much. Have a fantastic rest of your day.